And at this time, I'd like to introduce Sean Tierney. So Sean, please let us get started with the presentation.
All right. Good morning. Seema, it seems like we've got a new technical difficulty in that I'm getting a server not found error. Can you advance the slides?
Yes, I am. And we are on the agenda slide. So yes, please go ahead.
So thank you everyone for attending. Threat intelligence should be well enough understood by now. But if we go by the Gartner definition, threat intel is evidence-based knowledge about a menace or hazard to assets that can be used to inform decisions. I would also add that for information to become intelligence, it typically requires processing or analysis resulting in inference, deduction, conclusion, estimation, recommendations, or something along those lines. For it to be actionable, intelligence requires associated courses of action. These could be recommended courses of action resulting from the analysis itself, or predetermined courses of action based on triggers and thresholds. The associated threat data, which feeds creation of threat intelligence, tends to come from observation, response, and exchange. Observed indicators are data collected from one's own direct observation or experimentation. Response indicators are collected during incident response or investigation. Exchange threat data and intelligence is purchased or shared from another party. Today we'll talk about some of the challenges and solutions and the differences Infoblox makes. We'll cover a call to action and answer some questions. Next slide, please. Having too much data to evaluate is a challenge when prioritizing threat intelligence for action. Of course, the volume of security events has been high and ever increasing for decades. This is a pretty well understood problem, and a lot of talented folks work hard to pre-process, triage, and correlate these events so they may properly prioritize according to their internal procedures and their organization's risk profile. However, it seems as though not long ago people were clamoring that there was not enough threat data, indicators of attack or compromise, tactics, techniques, and procedure info related to threat actors. This is evident in the 2014 Ponemon study. But many of us have responded to these calls to arms over the years, and now there is an ever-increasing wealth of this information. As enterprise defenders, we need to consistently and constantly collect, analyze, correlate, triage, and prioritize a deluge of information, as well as external threat data. Reliable data from the right sources for your organization needs to be parsed and normalized so that it can be useful to enrich alarms and add context to analysis. Once a priority alarm or data point is surfaced, we need to rapidly build out context between that item and its relationship to the enterprise. Understand its historical behavior and how it correlates with threat intelligence. Processes, techniques, and tool sets need to support nimble and iterative data exploration. Next slide.
Yes. You can go ahead. Yes, I've went to the challenge slide, prioritizing threat info.
But don't pull your hair out. Centrally available data is another challenge. Addressing this for internally created events and intelligence can be an issue for some organizations, which is then compounded when external data is pulled into the mix. The volume issue is probably pretty obvious. The good news is that there is, in fact, quite a few open source, commercial, and exchange sharing-based sources of threat data. What you store and how you access it can be a challenge. The amount you retain and for how long have other significant considerations. Normalization is also a concern. The less good news is that the variety of sources rarely use precisely the same layout, format, and delivery mechanism. Each has their own schema and nomenclature. They require some work to normalize into a common operating vocabulary and access medium. We need to consider complexity as well. The taxonomy used by data providers, the data features available with each record, and the nuances of the content will affect your consumption of the information. Records which include multiple nested layers or deep detail can be essential for providing rich context, but at the same time, that complexity may introduce challenges for rapidly triaging and prioritizing events. In other words, it could be overwhelming in the richness and lead to delays in prioritizing and deriving the necessary level of information. Next slide.
Yes, go ahead.
At times, threat data and information may only be available in a siloed manner. That is to say, you might only be able to use data in a specific environment for specific purposes or on specific devices. There are a number of drivers for this, so understanding the reasons and implications is critical. The complexity of integrating that data across your cybersecurity infrastructure could be high. In some cases, that data may simply not be suitable for all applications due to format or content. The steps that could be required to access the data sources or transformation needed may be difficult. Vendor-specific or proprietary data should also be accounted for. For a variety of justifiable reasons, some data sets are tailor-made by the vendor to support their systems or contain elements unsuitable for other platforms. For instance, data in a specific format, such as a response policy zone, is designed specifically for a DNS server and may require additional transforms to be used in a SIEM or in other monitoring detection systems. Other data sets may have licensing restrictions limiting the platforms they can be distributed to, or possibly charges incurred based on the volume of the system services. Next slide, please. So for the solutions, best practices for investigation, sharing, and using intel, for making the most of threat data intelligence available to you, we recommend prioritize and understand threat indicators, centrally aggregate intelligence, apply it, share it. Next slide. And next slide. Prioritize and understand threat indicators. There's definitely a world of difference between identifying, detecting, and responding to an intrusion. Monitoring security events and triaging alarms is critical. However, that volume and frequency will have an impact on how much you can handle and to what extent you can handle it, process it, and utilize it. The detection of suspicious activity is not a certainty of attack. Likewise, exploitation of vulnerability is no guarantee that an infection has occurred. That's why I say detection does not equal exploitation, does not equal infection. Most people responsible for monitoring security events and responding to incidents could tell you of systems which yield true positives for actively detecting suspicious activity, which, due to their layered defenses, do not result in an infection or intrusion. So oftentimes when we talk about a AV detection, or we talk about a firewall detection, or some sort of detection of events going out the web channel from an enterprise, we'll see true detection based off of the signatures. So the signatures are firing properly, it's a true positive, and we'll see that a block was made or some other correlated information was assessed and an alert was thrown. So, but based off of defense in depth and hardening of systems, we may find that the exploitation occurred but was not able to write the system, or some other intermediate control prevented an infection to take hold. Now, does this suggest you should ignore those alerts? No, of course not. However, you will have to prioritize them appropriately according to your policies, procedures, and risk profile. A way to accomplish this is to enrich the alarms with internal and external intelligence. Slide, please.
Yes.
To do this, my usual recommendation is know your data, know your use case, know your customer. Instant response, hunting, and investigations tend to be data-driven and event-centric, or maybe it's the other way around. As we have discussed, there is a lot of data here, and tackling it all at once could simply be overwhelming. I recommend you start with a manageable subset. So how much is that? My response is that you'll know it when you see it. I typically start with getting some sort of assessment of the data that I'm looking at, whether it's internal or external, and then I'll bite off more than I can chew. Step back, reassess the volume and complexity, and then model the size of the data, the bandwidth, and storage required. Once you have samples or a working data set, then interrogate your data. Doesn't matter whether it's internal or external intelligence. Discover what it contains and consider how you might use it. Process flow, war game, data flow, mine your data, look at opportunities to fuse it with other internal data or external data, correlate, discover the new information or the new intelligence that you can create by the mashup. The context is king. Context is the circumstances that form the background for an event or the settings in which it can be fully understood and assessed. Generally, it includes factors that will help you parse through the noise and locate only the most relevant elements. These include physical presence, network location, software systems, or users involved, the time of day, threat actor roles, authorization, authentication, industry segment, historical behaviors, and the events which preceded or followed an incident. I often find that those last two are missed when processing a security event or an investigating incident, is failing to ask what happened before, what led up to this, and what happened next. I'd also say that automation is critical. Investigations and hunting can take a lot of manual effort in order to understand the nuances and detect elusive activity. So automate the obvious and the easy stuff first. Don't automate or document simply for the sake of it, but be mindful, be purposeful, and find opportunities that will allow you to decrease the level of human analysis or expedite the analysis process with the intent to give you time to focus on high impact or hard to automate. So from time to time throughout my career, I've been asked, as we deploy more advanced technologies, next generation firewalls, advanced detection and blocking prevention systems, would we get rid of antivirus or intrusion prevention systems because those are old technology? And my answer is typically no, we wouldn't get rid of those things because they allow you to deal with the commodity events and incidents, right? So if AV does a real good job at taking care of 40, 50, 60% of the malware infections, the things that are well known and well understood, and it prevents those from being an incident for you, then hang on to those. That gives you time to focus on the more complex. Automate the processing around the AV detection, the AV alerts, and how you would do the additional correlation investigation in an automated fashion so that you can ensure that you don't have a bigger problem going on and that system is properly protected and clean, and that the user is notified that they have issues and perhaps that they have introduced unwanted content into the environment. And then you should iterate through your threat hunting and incident response. Pivot, mine, rinse, repeat. Next slide. So here at Infoblox, when we do our threat investigations, we're typically using a custom investigation tool which is available to our customers. We call this tool Dossier. Dossier is our interactive analysis tool, originally purpose-built to suit our own investigative needs. But the monkey skipped the lab, as they say. Rather than trying to reel it back in, we cleaned that monkey up, we gave it some training, and we let it take on a life of its own. For our threat investigations, we apply an approach I call PFM, for pivot, farm, and mine. Dossier plays a critical role in the pivot and mine phases. Using Dossier, it takes seconds to conduct one search simultaneously across a dozen data sources. Search results are all displayed in a clean, consolidated interface. Customers say that they save 15 to 20 minutes of every man-hour spent in threat analysis. And for those of you who have to worry about such things, Dossier is an affordable solution. It allows you to use a single vendor for access to an array of databases you'd otherwise subscribe to individually. For those third-party data resources which require a usage fee, we've negotiated bulk rates so you benefit from fractional pricing and pay per usage. Next slide. And I believe this is the polling question, right?
And really quick here, Sean, sorry to interject. We had intended to do a quick demo of Dossier. Unfortunately, due to some technical difficulties last minute, we were unable to. We do apologize. However, again, if any of you are interested, please feel free to drop us a note through Q&A, and we'll make sure that we can try to follow up with you on the demo. And then I'm going to shift to the next slide, Sean. So we're on the centrally aggregate and shared threat intel data. Go ahead.
All right. So centrally aggregating threat intelligence data. We discussed this somewhat in framing out the challenges. When you have multiple sources of threat data, you frequently have differing formats and delivery protocols. This tends to increase the management and processing burden for pulling the data into your environment. Likewise, you'll find that your sources often have differing data schemas and content, as well as different nomenclature. Storing the data adds to the overhead if you're maintaining a private internal copy. Next slide, please. That should be the solution side. Your
Correct.
instant response
Yes.
to threat hunting needs broad visibility. You accomplish this by collecting intelligence across not only your network, but your cloud providers, the internet, mobile, social media, IoT, and more. Our recommendation is unify and homogenize the disparate collection mechanisms to the maximum extent possible. The reason for this is simply to simplify and reduce the complexity that's required to pull that data down, access that data, so that you can focus on the more difficult things, which is the correlation and investigation. Work to aggregate all the appropriate data into a single collection and optimize for query response and distribution to your infrastructure that can consume the data. This is another place where I've seen challenges in the past where enterprises do a very, very good job of collecting all the data, but indexing it and optimizing it for the investigator, the security analyst, that's hard. And there are a number of ways that can be optimized, but being able to give that incident responder tools where they can get responses quicker, they can query more frequently, that's essential to reducing their workload and enabling them to move forward and answer those questions of, do I have a problem and how big is that problem? Normalize the data features and nomenclature. To the extent possible and reasonable, keep track of how you and others refer to things, right? So we don't all refer to things the same way. I think in the malware and the antivirus industry, in cybersecurity and whatnot, I think that's pretty well known and pretty obvious that there are a number of malware families, and we don't all call them the same thing. But to the extent that you can, keep track of what you're calling them, how they're being referred to in your enterprise, using the different tools that you have access to or the different data you have access to. Increase the collection frequency and consistency. Pull down as much as you can, as often as you can. This is going to vary by organization, industry, risks, and concerns, as well as the update frequency of your sources. This is another item that's been surfaced in a variety of conversations, articles, and a previous Pone study, that the issue observed is often that threat data is not available soon enough or wide enough, but at the same time, those respondents, when asked further questions, also state that they're not pulling it as frequently as they can. So what I'd say is that on many threat intelligence platforms, the data is refreshed constantly as it becomes available through the processing and through the other sources. When we think about the Infoblox DNS firewall, we're publishing feeds that support the response policy zones on a 15-minute basis. And the idea there is to keep that as fresh as possible for the customer, and then it's ultimately up to the customer how frequently they want to pull that response policy zone. Next slide, please. Organizations care about data sharing and quality. They rely upon peers and security vendors for threat intelligence. 65% of survey respondents say they engage in informal peer-to-peer exchange of information or through a vendor threat exchange service. IT vendors and peers are also considered to provide the most actionable information. Law enforcement or government officials are not often cited as sources of threat intelligence. Threat intelligence needs to be timely and easy to prioritize. 60% of respondents who are only somewhat or not satisfied with current approaches say it is because the information is not timely, and 46% complain the information is not categorized according to the threat type or by attacker. Threat intelligence that is paid for is considered better. Most of the respondents say their organizations are using both fee and free-based threat intelligence. Companies are using fee-based threat intelligence because they think it's better. 68% say it's worth paying for threat intelligence because it's proven effective in stopping security incidents. I believe that part of the reason for that, part of the driving factors, is that the curation, the management of that data is then offloaded to a party that's doing that as a pay-for service. Next slide, please. And then we'll advance to the applying threat intel. Getting data into and out of your cybersecurity infrastructure can seem daunting. Evaluating the threat data from all your various providers can be overwhelming. Depending on your data, how you access it, and your areas of concern, you'll find that more than one source may have a particular piece of information. Next slide. Utilizing a threat intelligence platform to aggregate and curate the relevant data will ease the burden for consuming threat intelligence. The standardized data exchange protocols and programming interfaces reduces the complexity of distributing data to your security ecosystem. A threat intelligence platform, such as the Infoblox Active Trust, normalizes much of the terminology needed to manage the threat data and apply it. Having a consistent value range across vendors for measurements such as confidence and threat level help you consistently prioritize. While standardizing the classification and categorization of threats enables you to determine immediate or next steps for actionable intelligence. Again, this is what I was talking about in terms of normalization, using nomenclature, and being able to refer to things, whether they're malware, whether they're attacks, whether they're a threat actor or tactics used by them. But having that consistency across your data and being able to apply it programmatically is keys to automation, and then steps for how you can expedite some of this stuff and ease the burden for handling the obvious or the easier stuff and focusing on the more complex. Next slide. Experienced enterprise defenders will agree that the best kind of intelligence is predictive and actionable. The best case is predict the threat and where it will occur before it manifests. However, knowing the details to prevent it from materializing as a threat to your organization is the real goal. This typically requires knowing which actions to take. Next generation firewalls, and I think there's a couple clicks here. So next generation firewalls and web proxy filters are frequently very good solutions for this, since they detect and block activity on those channels. However, your DNS servers and the use of response policy zones can be an even more effective approach to preventing threats. Additionally, the event logs and referential data contained in your DNS, DHCP, and IPAM systems will aid in rapidly gaining context, assessing severity, possible impact when investigating an incident. These are the data sources and the tools which you can use to correlate between the security event, the threat intelligence, and the impact to your systems and your users in your environment. And once you understand those, once you're able to correlate those, you can also internally fuse levels of priority, levels of severity based off of the type of system, what kind of data it has, what kind of service it provides, who the users of those systems are, and the likelihood of further issues because of that, the access or the influence that user has, such as a CEO, a CFO, or a senior sysadmin that may have privileged access that an attacker can exploit. Next slide, please. Your security event management solutions are key places where an integration of threat intelligence builds context and is essential for prioritizing events and threats. Next slide, and we should be on repositories. Your investigative and security analytics platforms are another area where correlating threat intelligence and DDI referential data will yield rapid insights and a broader view of your organization's landscape. You may tie those very tightly to security event monitoring, alarming and alerting, but you also may use those for threat hunting or modeling and understanding your threat landscape, or for deeper dives that the threat hunters may want to take to understand context, behavior, and get a better picture of the environment. We offer proven, high-quality, and accurate solutions and have successfully delivered high-quality threat intelligence to our customers for over 10 years. We maintain a 24/7 threat operations team who verify threat indicators and curate machine-readable threat intelligence to output an enhanced, accurate, and up-to-date intelligence feed. Our accuracy is based on our verified observed block list of threat indicators that has a less than 0.001 false positive rate. All threat indicators include with them an appropriate expiration date so that they don't become stale. We can ease the security operations, enable higher return on investment from threat intel, by integrating it with our DDI solution to mitigate DNS-based threats quickly and effectively. Our Active Trust platform is a federated system for managing and sharing threat data from multiple sources across the cybersecurity infrastructure, enabling you to break silos in data usage. Again, this is the point I was talking about, being able to pull data from different sources and use it in different platforms. Not only do we have our own internal data that is available through Active Trust and Dossier, but we also have a marketplace of third-party vendors where you can consume additional data. And that data can be transformed into formats that can be directly used in other systems. We offer rich threat context through more than 20+ threat categories, macro classifying indicators such as malware, advanced persistent threat exploit kits. We also contain more than 300 classifications for more granular categorization of our threat intelligence data to provide insights on threats for decision-making or incidents and context for individual threats. Our data is widely sourced from thousands of original sources, including academics, researchers, law enforcement, infrastructure providers, government agencies, and trusted partners. Next slide, please. And I think this is the call to action. So for those of you that are interested, Infoblox would like to follow up and share with you the Ponemon study that we referred to in the presentation. And Seema, how do they take advantage of that?
So we'll basically be following up with all our attendees today, not only presenting them the slides, but definitely the Ponemon study as a follow-up, just to thank you for your attendance. And we hope that it would, give you a little bit more insight. I know that, Sean, you shared some great insights already from the study, and it's just meant to kind of be another nice informative source for all attendees. They shall receive that in an email.
Thank you. So my perspective on making threat intelligence actionable can be summed up like this. The best kind of intelligence is predictive and actionable. Begin by knowing your data, knowing your use case, and knowing your customers. Transform the threat data into intelligence through processing, which produces some form of deduction, conclusion, estimation, or inference. Make it actionable through recommended or predetermined courses of action based on defense capabilities, threat landscape, and risk appetite, and influenced by context and prioritization. Examples include response policy zones to prevent DNS resolution or threat activities such as malware downloads, command and control, or exploit kits. Let a threat intelligence platform work for you by centrally aggregating, normalizing, classifying, and categorizing data from multiple sources. Use the platform's threat data exchange capabilities to share intelligence across your enterprise by distributing the necessary formats to your cybersecurity infrastructure, such as Common Event Format, or CEF, DIX, or JSON. There may be other forms such as common separated values and just the simple raw that it comes in that you can consume. But use a tip to get into the format that you need for your various infrastructure. So I think that concludes most of it, and would like to open it for a Q&A.
This is Seema again. Thank you, Sean, for a great overview. And again, if you have any questions, please do jump into our Q&A window on the bottom. I've already received a couple of questions that I did answer as Sean was presenting, so thank you for your questions. One person did ask about if they'll get the slides, and yes, we'll be sharing the slides after the presentation today. There was also a question kind of regarding what DDI stood for. DDI is DNS, DHCP, and IP address management. Infoblox has been a market leader in this space, and the value that Sean said it brings, really combining the network intelligence that you can get from a DDI solution, be it the DHCP fingerprinting capabilities that we can provide, which means that we really can pinpoint specific users and devices that the users are associated with, in combination with threat intelligence on known bad domains, locations on the internet where certain users are trying to reach out to, can be very valuable. And it's a great way to kind of enforce the policy based on the threat intelligence that we can provide very much at a ubiquitous level, given that DNS is really a ubiquitous control point. So there's a lot of value in kind of having the combination of the strong DDI combined with threat intelligence that we curate in-house, and being able to combine the both together for faster response and more effective response on your network. So that's kind of a little background on kind of what the overall value is from DDI plus threat intel perspective. Another question, Sean, that I'd like to actually ask you that just came in. Does Infoblox have their own sandboxing, or are they using some well-known ones out there? One example they're asking about is Cuckoo. Can you answer on the sandboxing technology, and if we have anything to do with that or for different?
Absolutely. So what I would say is that we do have have an internal sandboxing solution. We have multiples, and one version of that does use Cuckoo. However, we've built that out a little bit so that we can handle more samples and do it in a automated fashion. One of our reasons for using Cuckoo is that it uses the Zen hypervisor, which is less frequently detected by malware as being a sandboxing environment.
Excellent. Thank you for answering that. The other question that came is, are there specific verticals that you've seen in your experience that tend to do more of kind of the data sharing aspect? You'd mentioned that there's some importance to that as well. So in terms of data sharing, is that something that you're seeing in the real world today?
So I see that quite frequently. There are a number of very good open source and subscription source or closed communities that share this data. I can tell you that from my direct professional experience, having worked in the financial industry for about 9 years, we were very, very good about sharing information amongst ourselves and about publishing that out where we could to the larger population. So there was several of these industry organizations have private sharing groups within them, but also use that same mechanism to push out either publicly or to their wider constituency, whether that's their customers or perhaps less mature organizations.
Thank you. And then I think one more question that came in has to do with kind of, we've heard a little bit about threat intelligence platforms. There are some out there. Kind of how do you see, Infoblox being different from that, or is it similar? Can you answer that?
Sure. So there are a number of threat intelligence platforms. We have a few competitors. The way that I would differentiate the Active Trust platform is in its streamlined nature and with its close proximity to both tools that we support, solutions we support, and then things within your own environment. One of the things that I think is very good about our solution is that we use it as a primary exchange. So it's very, very straightforward to tie it, like I've mentioned a couple times, to tie that directly to creation of response policy zones to feed your DNS firewall, right? Or to tie it to a threat watch list and feed that to your SIEM. And our platform, the Active Trust platform, will export the data in exactly the format that you need to be able to import into your system.
And then one more question is, you've mentioned that SIMs are one way of, again, leveraging the threat intel data. Do you actually provide integration with a particular SIMs only, or is it kind of any SIM? What kind of options do I have?
So we're currently pushing data out in the common event format, which is consumable by most SIMs. And then we do have direct integration with a few products, as well as working on specific direct integration with other products. So the SIMs that I know that our data and our output format works with include ArcSight, QRadar, and Logarithm.
Okay, very well. And I think that wraps up some of the questions that I've seen during the session today. Again, I wanted to thank everyone. Thank you, Sean, for the presentation today. And folks, again, look out for an email from us as a follow-up to this webinar with the ability to go back to the webinar that we have recorded today and get a copy of the slides as well as the Ponemon study. And hope that you had a great session and you have a remaining good day. Thank you all.
Thank you, Seema. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Take care.